My name is Vera Ashcroft, and I was publicly called a beggar by my sister's husband, inside a restaurant I partially funded. He didn't say it quietly. He didn't whisper. Braden looked me dead in the eyes, raised his glass halfway to the room, and said, "We don't serve beggars here. Try the shelter on 8th. It wasn't said with anger. It was said with the confidence of a man who knew no one would stop him, and no one did. The room chuckled, not in cruelty, but in complicity. It was the kind of dinner where everyone wore their best watches and worst intentions. White tablecloths, wine pairings, everything plated like it was for a magazine spread. And I had the audacity to arrive 10 minutes early, dressed in black, RSVP confirmed, gift in hand. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I simply turned, walked past the hostess stand, and exited through the glass doors like I had only come to check the lighting. My heels hit the pavement in rhythm, 4 steps, then stillness. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and sat without starting the engine. They'd done a lot over the years, erased my name from group messages, cut me out of family photos, whispered about my absence while ensuring I was never invited. But this wasn't silence anymore. This was strategy. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and opened a file I hadn't touched in years. An old login tied to an account they thought I'd forgotten. As the dashboard loaded and the screen brightened, I didn't feel angry. I felt something sharper. They thought they could humiliate me in public and walk away smirking. What they didn't know is that I didn't come for dinner. I came for the audit. It didn't start with the dinner. It started with the album. 3 weeks before Braden made that comment, a package arrived at my apartment. A thick white box tied with navy satin. No return address, but unmistakably Stella's style. Perfect corners, curated branding. She always had a talent for packaging cruelty in elegance. I should have thrown it out, but I didn't. I brought it inside, placed it on my kitchen table, and stared at it for 2 days before untying the ribbon. Inside was a leather-bound photo album, the Ashcroft family celebrating a legacy. The irony nearly made me laugh. I flipped through it with the caution of someone expecting pain, and pain came fast. First page, Thanksgiving at the lake house, Stella and Braden at the head of the table, their daughter Harper in mid-laugh. My chair was there, but I wasn't. Second page, Mom's 70th birthday, balloons, cake, a toast in progress. I stood at the far corner in the original photo. Now I was cropped out entirely. Third page, a wedding photo. Everyone posed beneath the willow tree in the backyard. My hand was still there, resting lightly on the arm of a chair. But the rest of me? Gone. It wasn't a mistake. It was a revision. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd edited me out. I closed the album and left it on the table for a week, unopened. I couldn't bring myself to shred it. Not yet. Part of me still hoped that maybe, somewhere in the back, there'd be one image they forgot to doctor. Just one where I was whole. But no. The last page was titled, "The Legacy Continues." Beneath it, 6 photos. Stella, Braden, Harper, and Braden's parents. A golden frame around their smiling faces. I wasn't even mentioned as a footnote. It wasn't just visual, it was systemic. The group chat I used to be in during Mom's chemo treatments had been deleted. I'd noticed I stopped getting calendar invites, even for major events. Christmas Eve, Easter brunch, Harper's graduation. When I asked Stella once, politely even, if there'd been a mix-up, she smiled like I'd asked for something unearned. "Oh, it must have gone to your old email," she'd said, sipping from a glass I'd gifted her years ago. But I hadn't changed my email in a decade. The exclusions were small at first. A missed RSVP, a skipped birthday call, an awkward silence at family dinners when I mentioned work. Then came the bigger things: Stella's promotion at the firm, Braden's real estate deal, Harper's summer internship, all of which had somehow benefited from resources I once helped secure. Not that anyone remembered, or admitted it. And through it all, there was Mom. The last time we sat together, just the 2 of us, was on her porch. She was frail, her fingers trembling from the medication, but her eyes were sharp. She told me, "They think they're clever with their invitations and speeches, but you're the one who shows up when it counts. Don't ever let them convince you this family runs without you. I kept that memory like a secret, like a shield. But Mom didn't live long enough to see the final cut. What they'd do with her name, her estate, her legacy. Or maybe she did. And like so many mothers with daughters who barely tolerate each other, she chose to hope instead of intervene. The night of the dinner, after I left the restaurant and sat in my car, I found that memory bubbling up again. Not the exact words, but the tone. The way she looked at me. The way she saw me. That night, I didn't go home. I drove. No destination, just motion. I passed the bookstore where I used to take Harper for story time. The bakery Mom loved. The lawyer's office where she signed her first will. I ended up at the marina. It was quiet. Still. I walked the length of the dock, heels clicking against the wood, echoing across the water like questions with no answers. I sat at the edge, feet dangling, and asked myself aloud, no audience, no judgment. What if this wasn't just about being forgotten? What if it was deliberate? Because that's what it felt like, a long, quiet campaign, one erasure at a time. Not dramatic, not cruel, just effective. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the bookshelf in the hallway. Behind old yearbooks and a box labeled E 2011 Taxes, I pulled out a green folder. The tab read, Estate, Original Copy. It was the file Mom had given me 2 years before she died. She made me promise to keep it safe. At the time, I didn't understand why. Now I did. The folder smelled like old paper and lavender. Mom always kept dried flowers pressed between pages. She said important documents deserved softness. I unfolded the first page, careful not to bend the corners. Her name stared back at me in thick black type. Margaret Evelyn Ashcroft, and then mine, just a few lines below. Vera Elise Ashcroft, designated beneficiary of Section 4, Joint Property and Discretionary Trusts. I didn't breathe for a moment. This version of the will wasn't the one read aloud at her funeral. I remembered that afternoon vividly, the lawyer's voice cool and clinical, reciting names and asset lines as if they were grocery items. Stella's name was on everything. Mine wasn't mentioned once. I sat through the entire thing with a half smile frozen on my face, nodding like I understood. I didn't. No one ever showed me the full document. I assumed the final version had changed before Mom passed, or worse, that I'd just been removed quietly. But this was signed and notarized 3 months before Mom was even hospitalized. There was a different signature on the final will. That much I remembered. I also remembered when they told me she died, while I was on a work trip in Toronto. No reception, no access, and 2 days behind every call. I came home to find her already buried, and someone had amended this document while I was gone. I set the will down and opened my laptop. There was only one person I could trust with this. Not Stella, not Brayden, certainly not the family lawyer. Celia Ward. She was a paralegal who'd worked with Mom's estate attorney for years. She once stayed late with me during a filing mix-up and shared her leftover lunch. A small kindness, but I remembered it. I found her email buried in an old thread and wrote, Celia, hope you're well. Quick question. Do you know if any revisions were made to my mother's will in the final 30 days before she passed? I stared at it for a full minute before hitting send. Then I sat still. No music, no phone, no distractions. The reply came at 6:42 a.m. the next morning. Vera, you may want to check the remote access logs. There was an amendment made on a Saturday night. That's all I can say. Saturday night. I grabbed my old planner. I still used one, a habit from law school I never shook, and flipped back. That Saturday, I was in Toronto. The retreat had no cell reception. I'd left my phone in my luggage and spent the weekend speaking at a conference on estate conflict resolution, of all things. I hadn't even known Mom was in hospice. I read Celia's email again. An amendment made remotely. That meant someone had Mom's login or convinced the firm to process changes on her behalf. Either way, the will had been altered while I was off-grid, and the final copy they read conveniently erased the only clause that protected me. I sat there, arms folded, eyes burning. It wasn't a mistake. It was an edit. And edits leave fingerprints. That day, I didn't go to work. I took out every legal folder I'd shelved and never touched. Bank statements, trust fund documents, co-ownership records from when I helped Mom refinance the house after Dad died. I made coffee, then made copies. By noon, my kitchen table looked like a war room. Contracts, signatures, metadata, dates, and the envelope. The one Mom had slipped into a book I never finished reading, The Art of Quiet Influence. It was still sealed, my name written on it in her script, slanted, elegant, unshaken. I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Vera, if they ever try to rewrite your place in this family, don't ask for permission. You were always meant to lead. Don't let noise become law. Mom, I closed my eyes and held the paper against my chest. That night, I started making calls. Not to them. To the institutions they forgot I helped build. I ordered document copies from 2 silent LLCs, confirmed I was still listed as a primary trustee for 3 dormant funds, and reopened a client portal I hadn't logged into since 2016. I wasn't ready to fight them. Not yet. I was preparing to audit them. The thing about erasure is that it's rarely loud. It's a slow, steady sanding of presence. One memory, one name, one access code at a time. And by the time you notice, the outline of you is already fading from the frame. But I had records. More importantly, I had access. 3 days after finding the letter, I drove out to the house. Not the one I grew up in, that was sold years ago, but Stella's estate on the north end of the lake, built on old money and new arrogance. I knew her schedule, knew she'd be in Santa Fe that week for a board retreat, and Braden never stayed home when she traveled. He preferred hotels and curated bar tabs. Only Marlene would be there, the housekeeper. And Marlene liked me. She opened the door without question. I just need to pick up a few things Mom left me, I said gently. Marlene didn't ask which. She simply nodded and returned to polishing the dining chairs. The house was spotless, museum-like, hallways of glass and gray. Upstairs, I took the left turn Stella always told guests was just storage. I walked straight to the far end, the wall with the portraits. There it was. The legacy wall, 6 oversized frames in gold and navy, Stella and Braden in the center, Harper just beneath. On the flanks, Braden's parents, then Stella's in-laws. That was the entire curated lineage, my mother's image repurposed into a backdrop, not a matriarch. And I was nowhere. In one of the holiday portraits, I remember it well, I was standing just behind Stella, smiling. In the version mounted here, I was gone, fully cropped. In another, Thanksgiving maybe, only 3 place settings were visible at a table I distinctly remember sitting at. I stepped closer. My reflection blurred in the glass. I didn't cry, I didn't fume. I just stared at the wall and thought, so this is the history they want to remember, a version where I never existed. Then I did something small, quiet. I pulled out my phone and began taking photos. Every frame, every label, every piece of rewritten memory, evidence. Back at home, I laid everything out across the kitchen island. Photo evidence, original estate documents, a folder marked Ashcroft Holdings, Dormant LLCs. Even the scanned copy of an old contract Stella once asked me to co-sign just for convenience, back in 2017. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. She was always drafting property transfers, estate tax shelters. I had good credit, and she had a plan. That's what I believed. But now, I read it differently. The wording gave her partial control over a real estate trust Mom and I created years ago. A trust I believed dissolved. But it hadn't been. It had been repurposed, renamed, and filed under a shell company registered in Braden's name. I cross-referenced the trust code with a dashboard login I hadn't touched in years. And it worked. The numbers blinked onto the screen. $43.7 million in fixed assets tied to the Ashcroft Lakeview Trust. And my name? Still listed, Still active, still legal. The audit had begun. Retaliation for me was never about rage. It was about record. At 7 a.m., I logged into an account they'd long forgotten. Northleaf Innovations, a biotech company I'd backed years ago with what little I had. They all laughed at the time. Stella called it a phase, and Braden once asked if I even knew what biotech meant. I didn't need to know, I needed to believe. Now, Northleaf was preparing to go public. Its valuation? $980 million. I opened my portfolio summary and scrolled to trust account 217A. Still active, still in my name, still mine. I didn't smile. I opened a second portal, TNT Strategies, a dormant holding entity I created during law school. Back then, it was theory. Now, it was a shield. With 3 precise clicks, I moved every cent from the trust into a layered offshore structure under my sole control. The system pinged. Transfer complete. $1 billion. I printed the confirmation and slid it into a manila folder. Then I scribbled on a post-it. I'm not loud, I'm deliberate. Later, I reread an old email from Stella. Back in 2018, she'd asked me to sign a temporary estate delegation form. Just a formality, she had said. But buried inside was a clause granting her estate control, set to expire in 2 years. That was 4 years ago. I opened a blank document and wrote the words carefully. Notice of intent to reclaim financial authority. All jointly held Ashcroft assets now subject to full audit and reassignment under original beneficiary. Vera E. Ashcroft. No anger, just clarity. I signed it. Then I opened the family group chat. Reflexively, gone. Not archived, erased. They hadn't just excluded me. They deleted me. That's when her email came. Subject, legacy meeting, required attendance. Stella. CC'd to Estate Counsel, Braden, Harper, the firm. We'll be finalizing distributions and restructuring the family legacy. Your attendance is expected. I stared at the screen, the corners of my mouth curving just slightly. They were finally ready to talk. But I had already written the ending. The conference room smelled like power. Walnut-paneled walls, chilled water bottles, polished brass nameplates. Stella sat at the head, her blazer sharp, expression unreadable. Braden flanked her like a bodyguard, arms crossed, lips already tight with judgment. I walked in at exactly 9:58 a.m. No one stood. No one greeted me. I didn't wait for permission. I walked to the far end of the table, placed my folder down, and opened my laptop. The projector flickered on. First slide. Ashcroft Estate Timeline. Irregularities and revisions. No small talk. No smile. I'll begin with the signature dated March 8th, submitted while I was in Toronto. Here's my boarding pass. Time-stamped photos. Legal proof I couldn't have signed it. They said nothing. Next slide. Metadata from the estate dashboard. Logins traced to Stella's IP. Access made under expired authority. Braden shifted. Stella blinked once. Final slide. Trust 217A, $1 billion valuation. Then, without a word, I clicked transfer. The screen confirmed it. Transferred to T&T Strategies. Beneficiary, Vera E. Ashcroft. Silence bloomed. Braden's hand clenched. Stella exhaled too sharply. This isn't what Mom intended, she finally said, voice thin. No, I said calmly. It's what she prepared for. You just thought I'd never notice. No one contested. No one adjourned. One by one, they stood and left. I stayed, packed my things slowly. As I turned to leave, a junior associate I barely recognized walked by, paused, and slid a small note toward me on firm letterhead. They're planning something. Watch your back. I didn't flinch. I just folded the paper, placed it into my coat pocket, and walked out without looking behind me. Because by then I knew the game was no longer theirs to play. There was no applause, no spotlight, just quiet. And this time, it didn't feel empty. The transfer was done. The $1 billion trust in my name, the silence they'd used to erase me, now stood as proof that I existed, and that I'd won. They didn't say sorry, but they didn't deny me anymore. I opened the drawer and found Mom's old card. Her handwriting was steady, even then. They'll try to erase you. Don't let them. I placed it beside the audit logs, the transfer receipt, and the note I wrote the night I began. I'm not loud, I'm deliberate. Then came the email. Subject, Women's Leadership Conference. Nomination confirmed. You were recommended by someone who believes in quiet power. I didn't hesitate. I clicked accept. Because I didn't need their forgiveness. And I never needed their permission. Some legacies are handed down. Mine was almost buried, then built again, signature by signature. And when the story of this family is told again, they won't speak my name out of affection. They'll speak it because now they have no choice.